Today's build is one of my favorite archetypes.
Who's that? The anti-archetype.
This build archetype is one that's always tricky to build around, so you have to be creative. This build archetype, maybe not the most optimized, but I really like the flavor of these builds. And this build uses a class that's not always seen as the best, the Ranger. Today's build is a Stranger build, or a strength-based Ranger. These builds are some of my favorites because of the creativity they require and also the creativity they produce in their results, often coming with unique playstyles, unique combinations, things that other classes just can't do. So today, this is the Reaver. The Reaver build is a strength-based ranger that is going to focus on melee combat using heavy weapons. This is probably the most fun ranger build I've come up with so far in the D&D 2024 Player's Handbook, and I think it actually works really well. To start on this build, we're looking at our background. The background that stands out the best to me is Farmer. Farmer allows us to bump Strength, Constitution, and Wisdom. All of these are going to be important for this build. However, the more important thing is that we pick up the Tough feat. This is really important for allowing us to get extra HP on a ranger that's going to be a little squishy, especially when we're up in melee. And opposed to other melee fighters, we don't get access to heavy armor, meaning we're going to be a little bit lower on AC, so Tough helps us make up for that in our HP. The next thing we want to look at is our stats. For this build, Strength is the most important. We're a strength-based ranger after all. The next important stat we're looking at is Constitution, helping to keep us alive in the front line. Dexterity is the next one up, which we want to be a 14. We want 14 to maximize our medium armor. And lastly, everything else we have goes into Wisdom. Now looking at how I would build this, our Wisdom isn't the highest. It's probably around a 12 or a 13 using something like Point Buy. The reason that a 13 is a good threshold to aim for is if we want to multi-class, it allows us to do that later on. For this build, I'm not planning on multi-classing, however, it is a good option for this build. As for the lineage here, the one I'm going with is Human. Human, importantly, allows us to pick up one additional starting feat, and I am going for Lucky. Lucky allows us to be a lot more consistent. Lucky is just a really good option. As we get into level 1, we are going to go into Ranger. Now, my opinion of the Ranger in the 2024 Player's Handbook is it drew the short end of the stick. It is not the strongest, however, I still think it's very viable and we could definitely build around it. Our first level in Ranger, we pick up several things. Spellcasting and Favorite Enemy are nice and we will use them. They're not our main playstyle though. Our main level 1 feature is in Weapon Mastery. This allows us to pick up 2 weapons that we get the Weapon Mastery properties of, and this build uses 2 weapons in particular. The first one is the Greataxe. The Greataxe is a very high damage weapon, and most importantly, it has the Cleave Mastery property, allowing us to make an extra attack when we have 2 targets in the range of our weapon and both 5 feet next to each other. The second one we're going to pick up is the Pike. Now the Pike is probably not a popular weapon, but it gives us the Push Weapon Mastery, which allows us to maneuver enemies around. This will be very important to our playstyle. Ranger level 2, we pick up our Fighting Style, and we are going to pick up either the Defense or the Great Weapon Fighting Style. Personally, I think Defense might actually be better here, even though we are using almost exclusively Great Weapons. Our AC is not going to be the highest. Defense is going to give us a little bit more than the extra damage on Great Weapon Fighting Style, so I'm leaning Defense here. Level 3 is where this build really kicks off into our playstyle, so pretty early on, we're going to pick up the Hunter subclass, giving us Horde Breaker. Now what Horde Breaker does, very similar to the Cleave Weapon Mastery property, is when 2 enemies are within 5 feet of each other and we attack one of them, if our weapon can reach both of them, we get to make an additional attack. So right now, at level 3, if we use our Greataxe and we attack one enemy that's next to another enemy and we're within 5 feet of both of them, we can make 3 attacks in one turn. This allows us to be very effective in these niche situations. Granted, these aren't going to come up all the time unless your DM's combats lean this way anyways. However, when this situation comes up, it is very effective. And the rest of this build is going to be pushing to make these situations happen more often. At level 4, we're going to pick up a feat. The feat we're looking at picking up here is Great Weapon Master. This will round out our strength, so ideally our strength is odd going into this build. It gives us extra damage on our heavy weapon attacks, which is both our Pike and our Greataxe. And when we reduce an enemy to 0 hit points or score a critical hit with one of these weapons, we get a bonus action attack at full strength. At level 5, we pick up extra attack, and this is another gear in which this build kicks in. The reason this kicks in is because now we can swap weapons on our action attack, meaning we can use our Pike to help set up our Cleave attacks. So how this works is our first attack on our turn, if 2 enemies are 10 feet apart from each other, we can use our action with our Pike to push enemies together. So our first attack will hit the first enemy, use our push weapon mastery, pushing them together. We then run forward and then switch weapons as a part of our next attack to the Greataxe, allowing us to attack and hopefully get off our Cleave, giving us an additional Cleave attack and a Horde breaker attack. And if any of those 4 attacks crit or kill, we then can do a bonus action Great Weapon Master attack. And while this situation might not come up all the time, having this push allows us more flexibility in making these situations happen. The base Ranger is very much built around Hunter's Mark. Our build does not take into account Hunter's Mark very often. However, the way our build is made up, if we don't get our Great Weapon Master bonus action attack, that is an opportunity to cast Hunter's Mark or to move Hunter's Mark to a new target, making us still effective. At 5th level, we also get 2nd level spells, and there's 2 that I'm looking at. The first one is Bark Skin. Bark Skin might not be important for us. However, if our AC is below 17, we don't really have much else we're doing with our 2nd level spell. Might as well throw on some Bark Skin. The other one I'm looking at is Summon Beast. Now, the Summoned Beast we can create actually has a pretty good strength score. I think it's +4. This Summoned Beast can then use its strength score to push our enemies around, hopefully pushing them together. This one is a little DM dependent. The push action isn't in its stat block, but that's up to your DM. I think most DMs would allow it. This can be useful to help set up our cleaves and to help push enemies around. It might not be the most effective for what we're doing, but it's a nice assist along just good damage, good tankiness for the team. Summon Beast is just a good spell. At Ranger level 6, we get Roving, which is an increase of 10 feet. Somewhat useful for us, but honestly, not that great. Me personally, if somebody in my campaign was playing a Ranger, I would probably give them an additional ASI here. That's just my opinion though. At level 7, we pick up another Hunter feature. Now we can either take Escape the Horde or multi-attack defense. I think either one really has merit. I think Escape the Horde might be more beneficial for us on most days because it allows us to maneuver where we need to be more effectively, meaning we can get into the positions to get our cleaves off. Now, I can see that not coming up all the time. However, I think it is going to be a valid option. I think multi-attack defense is good against really strong single enemies like boss monsters. I think it's really good in those circumstances. So each day when you're picking which one you take, keep those in account. I think I'm mostly going to be picking Escape the Horde unless I know we're having a boss fight. Level 8, we pick up our 2nd ASI or feat. And here we have a ton of options. The first option I'm looking at is a Strength ASI. Bumps up our strength, more damage, etc. The next one I'm looking at is if we have a 15 in Dex, so our Dex is odd, we can pick up Medium Armor Master. This is going to raise our AC, raise our Dex, all good. Conversely to that, if our Constitution is odd, I might pick up Heavily Armored. This gives us heavy armor proficiency as well as rounding out our con. This can bump our AC from heavy armor and also give us a bump in HP rounding out our con. So I would pick one of those if we think we need more defense, more AC, and our Dex or con is odd, allowing us to round those out. Another one I'm looking at is Charger. Now Charger could raise our strength, so if our strength is still odd after picking up Great Weapon Master, now we can pick up Charger. What Charger does is it allows us another push effect, so it can increase our efficacy of using our push effects in order to get our cleaves off. This one is a little niche, so I probably wouldn't pick it up unless I really needed to round out my strength, but also if our strength is odd, we can pick up Heavily Armored to do something like that. So it's a niche one, but I think the effect is cool. The other one I'm looking at picking up is Sentinel. Sentinel allows us to keep targets that we have in our cleave range there. It makes it so our targets are less likely to split apart and make it harder for us to do our cleave, so Sentinel can keep targets together. And beyond this level, that's about it. We're doing the same thing moving forward. We're just getting more effective at what we're doing. I really love the Reaver. I think it's a really unique build for the Ranger, and I think giving it this strategy helps it be really good and shine even in these niche circumstances when a normal Ranger might not shine otherwise. But that's my take on the Stranger. Let me know what multi-classing options or other options for this build I didn't consider that might be good. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time.